We're live. We're live with David Cannady. Okay, my name is Sandra Sheffer. I'm the president of the Democratic Women's Club of West Broward, and I have an opportunity to interview another one of the candidates for Broward State Attorney, David Cannady. So I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself to you, and then throughout the conversation or near the end, we'll talk about requesting your vote by mail ballot. The primary election is August 18, 2020. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but we're going to go ahead and let David Cannady introduce himself to the people.
To the people, I like that.
To the people.
How you doing today?
Yes, I'm good.
Sandra, how you doing today? You doing all right?
Hanging in there.
Good. Well, my name is David Cannady. I'm a prosecutor with the state attorney's office currently, and I'm running for state attorney in Broward County. Off air, it was funny. You asked me how old I was. I'm actually 35. I'm going to be 36 coming soon, and I have about 15 years. I have 15 years of experience in policy, law, and legislation. And I guess I did it well, so the skin stayed clean.
All that water.
But I work all that water. Exactly, all that water. So prior to becoming an attorney, I started a business at age 17, which became a multi-million-dollar business. And after that, we had over 150 employees. After that, I worked in the Obama administration and for President Obama's 2008 campaign for president, and I did well. So they asked me to work within the administration. Then I worked in the U.S. Senate with Senator Roland Burris out of out of Illinois, but he had an office in Chicago. In addition to that, I then came down to Tallahassee, worked in the Florida Supreme Court with Justice Quince, and then also in the Office of Policy and Budget in the Executive Office of Policy Budget in Tallahassee. And then after that, became a prosecutor down here in Broward County. So that's where a lion's share of my experiences come from, other than working with Senator Jim Webb and Senator Warner out of Virginia as well. And through that process, I've been able to understand policy, understand the connection between the executive branch, the legislative branch, and how to actually work together and get work done. So one of the things that differentiates me between every single candidate that's running is that I've done on the highest levels, from DC to Tallahassee, down here to Broward County, and bringing coalitions together to get the work of the people done, which I think is most important here in Broward. And the youthful energy is always a good thing. It pushes us forward. But that's a little bit about me. But I'm also a husband, and we just had our first child, my wife and I, a month ago, and he's a boy, little baby boy, another David Cannady. And times these days have been interesting for both of us, because my wife's from New Orleans and her mother's here helping us out. So we actually have a lot of conversations about being Black in New Orleans in the 60s and 70s, and how the similarities of what's going on now in our culture as well. So it's a good time to be alive, but it's also a good time for change.
Yeah, it's definitely a time for change. And you were saying about your policy experience. Like, why do you think that's important for the person that's going to be the next state attorney in Broward County to understand policy?
If you don't understand policy, you don't know how to finish connecting the dots. Okay, I was actually on a podcast yesterday before I interviewed with the AKAs, or not interviewed, but had the forum with the AKAs, and they asked the
that was North Broward Delta was involved in that event too. Right. Y'all gonna get in trouble.
You're right. You're right. Because we had a Delta one the week before, but you're right. Yeah. Delta then the AKAs.
Yeah, I think South Broward did the last one.
Exactly. They could all do them over again. I'll show up again.
And they will.
But the policy ones are important, or the policy experience is important, because you see everybody out on the streets now, all right? But without the continued efforts of sitting down with the elected officials and also the people that are able to affect change, none of the change is actually going to get done. The rubber meets the road when it comes to the courtroom, when it comes to legislation, when it comes to law. Evidence has shown that trainings don't work. Implicit bias trainings and things like that don't work. Policies put in place to affect change and end archaic ways of doing business
But you
have
need, I
changed.
don't want to, I'm gonna interrupt you a little bit, and I'm sorry I'm gonna do that. But you do
We're having a
need that
conversation.
implicit, yes, you do need that implicit bias training in order to affect the people that are making the policies, right? Because you can have a whole bunch of policymakers, and if they're clueless to what's going on, or they don't even recognize that they have some junk happening in their decision making, that's problematic. So you do need the training. I mean, it can't just be the training and nothing else, the implicit bias training and nothing else, but you do need that training, because we have people making policies and making decisions every day, and they don't benefit a whole bunch of folks, you know, because they don't recognize that it needs to be something a little bit different for certain populations.
So I agree with you. So I love to cook. So what they call the Trinity when you go in the store, what is it? Green peppers, onions, and celery. That's the Trinity. So you throw that in, you got some good seasoning, at least going from the start. So you're absolutely correct. You can't have one without the other. But what we tend to do is continue to elect the same people in the same positions, and then not do and then include the implicit bias training without replacing the person with the old ways of doing things, and include the implicit bias training, and then change the policy. You change the person, you change the policy, include the training. But that's not the end of it. So for instance, excessive use of force. Everyone's talking about excessive use of force now. In the state attorney's office currently, and I'm a prosecutor and I know this, we have the chief law enforcement officer, who is the state attorney, does not have a seat on the excessive use of force administrative panels with any of the local municipalities or BSO.
Because
why? They just don't. We just don't. That is a simple fix to a problem. And the reason why that's important, more so than an implicit bias training, no matter how the speaker or one of my opponents wants to say an intensive implicit bias training, what's that mean? An intensive implicit bias training? It's nothing. So you need to have that training, but you also need to have a seat at the table. You can have the title of the chief, but what are you doing with that title? If you're not doing anything to use that bully pulpit to say, hey, I'm going to sit on this panel with you guys. Now, I may not have a vote because it's within your purview to have me have a vote, but I need to know when the rubber meets the road, when a police officer uses excessive amount of force, what are you doing as the administrative body to actually ensure that our community is safe from the continued actions of this individual? Is it a slap on the wrist? Is it a suspension with pay? Is it a suspension without pay? And then when it comes to our desk, it's not 70 different violations of excessive use of force. We can cut that number in half or cut it in a third before we ever get to 70. That's why you sit on the panel. Then another thing I'm going to do, which I've said before, is have these daily briefings come through. The state attorney, nor do any of our assistant state attorneys, have daily briefings or weekly briefings on the excessive use of force used by officers in this county. We don't know how many excessive use of force complaints that we have total. So we're going to make sure that we get those daily numbers, we get those weekly numbers, and we're transparent with it. And then when we see it spiking in areas, we have the ability to intervene prior to any hardships coming to our citizens. Those are actual policy changes.
Let me ask you, does the office have the ability to track that information right now, or is that something that you would have to implement with new technology or anything to that effect?
No, it's not new technology. What it is requesting the information, gathering it, then you can input it into your current technology or invest in new technologies to disseminate it to the community. But we already have a plan. When I'm state attorney, we are going to put together a historic and current documentation or data-driven documentation to show the public what has gone on in the past and what we're currently doing, whether it's filing cases, arrests, filing cases, dismissing cases, diverting cases based on gender, race, and sexual preference, based on other measurable metrics as well. We've already sat down with criminologists here in South Florida for hours getting this information out. It's happening in Chicago with Kim Fox. It's happening in Baltimore, Maryland with Marilyn Mosby. It's happening in Jacksonville. We just have not got on the train to get it done.
So what if you get pushback from BSO and they don't want to provide you with that information? Then what happens?
You
Because
can't. They have to.
police officer that's using excessive force, they're not necessarily going to get arrested. So that if they're not arrested, how does the state attorney get involved with that? How do you get that information if they're not willing to give it to you?
So the number one thing is so some of my opponents say, let me answer your question first, because
Answer it.
my people always say that I don't answer the question directly. First, I get around to it. So I answer it first. First, it's a public records request. That's what it is. Once you request the public records, they have to give it to you. Okay.
Redacted, they can give it to you redacted.
The second portion is they can only redact so much information. We're the lawyers, we understand that. Okay. However, the bigger portion or the bigger part of that is to maintain the relationship with our law enforcement brothers and sisters. We have to maintain a relationship. You cannot go in, throw your weight around, and think that the other half of law enforcement is going to work with you. It's not. If you think that you're going to be the state attorney and not have a relationship with police officers, you're out of your mind. The only way that we get started is if a police officer, or the majority of the ways that we get started, is if the police officer provides us with a probable cause affidavit. Or as the feds do it, there's a piece of paper, somebody presented it to us, and then we work with law enforcement to create the case itself. At some point in the process, you're working with law enforcement. So we are law enforcement. We literally have a badge. So to say that the state attorney's job is to prosecute police officers, you're missing you're missing everything. We are law enforcement.
But you police yourself, right? So there's, if someone in the ranks or in the midst does something wrong, and if they violate the law, then, they would get charged just as anybody else. Or
absolutely.
They charged as anybody else.
Whether you're a prosecutor or not.
Right.
So that's why we have our public corruptions unit. And even when a prosecutor does something wrong, or someone that works in the office, historically, we have disciplined those individuals. It has been said in the past that the current state attorney has used their discretion, and I'll just say this in a very diplomatic way, used their discretion and fired the individual rather than prosecuting because they couldn't find areas to prosecute this individual. But no, they've been disciplined. When I'm state attorney, if a prosecutor uses their power illegally to assist in a criminal enterprise, is what you're talking about, they'd be prosecuted, just like any other person that was involved in public corruption.
They know better. Sometimes it's like you get people, they get caught up in some stuff and they don't know better. But I mean, you're law enforcement, so you would know better, right? You understand the law.
But it's not just us. It's when we talk about public officials, we're talking about other politicians who are elected. We're talking about law enforcement. We're talking about the public trust, okay? When you break the public trust, the public has elected you to this position and you've done something. Usually it is not, it's not you robbed a store, okay? Usually it's you've stolen money or you have used your power to benefit yourself. And those are the types of things that I learned while I was in DC and also while I was in Tallahassee, of people, how to appropriately prosecute those cases and identify those cases. Because unfortunately, here in Broward and up in Tallahassee, and as you know, in DC, we see every day on the news, there is corruption. So we need individuals like the DOJ. If it was working correctly, we would be prosecuting individuals who are committing crimes that break the public trust.
Okay. All righty. So those are some of the things that you want to do for the office. So we're going to talk about, we talked a little bit about implicit bias training a little bit, and you kind of, not that you're on the fence, you just said it doesn't work without something else also happening. So
I don't think implicit bias training, and I don't mean to cut you off, I don't think you start with implicit bias training. That's not where you start. Again, you start, if you want the same old actions, elect the same people, okay? There are people who are backed by, in this race, who are backed by traditional politicians, who are in the county commission, that are in our city councils, that are sitting in law enforcement chairs right now, even sitting in the state attorney's office. One of my opponents is backed by the sitting state attorney. If you want the same stuff, elect the same people. If you want a new face with new ideas, you have that with me. So the first thing you got to do is elect somebody into office that is not backed by those traditional mores of politics in Broward County. Second thing you do is you implement policies that affect change. Then the last thing you do, which is the easiest thing that people say all the time, which is the implicit bias training. That's when you change the culture of your office. But you can't change the culture of your office if you don't get new leadership in the office.
So how are you going to get buy-in? So you come in day one and you're going to change the face, the way the office is operating. And what if, you know, if you have a whole bunch of the attorneys that come and they be like, listen, we don't want no part of what you're doing, bruh. What are you going to do?
I love the way you said that. Listen, we don't want any part of what you're doing.
We don't want no parts of what you're talking about.
So people ask the question all the time, what do you, I always say, what's the first thing that you're going to do? What are your priorities? And I say, look, everything can't be your first thing you're going to do. But one of my priorities is to sit down with every single attorney and say, look, your job's not in jeopardy. We're in the middle of a pandemic. I'm not going to fire you. And
you have to, though. What if
hold
you
on.
So, because the one example that I wanted to give is like Kim Gardner in St. Louis, the circuit attorney. She comes in and she wants to do all of this stuff. Everybody left. They all quit.
That's
she had
different.
100% turnover. Like with all of you coming in with your progressive ideas, or you trying to do things differently. You know what happens if they're like, no, we want no part of this. What do you do?
That happened with Kim Gardner.
Yeah.
With Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. He came in and fired over, I believe, 60% of the office.
Yes, Kim Fox ran into pushback. She had to get rid of some people.
Kim Fox not only ran into pushback, Kim Fox walks around with armed guards because she knows people are coming after. So does Marilyn Mosby. Yes. You had Marilyn Mosby have people quit. You had in Orlando, Ariel Masiala. Yeah, she had 40% of the office.
She's like, I'm not running.
40% of the office quit too. So we can't control people quitting. We can't control that. We can't control that type of attrition because people have already made up their minds, some people in the office. But if you choose to stay, this is why I say I'm going to sit down with every single attorney in the office. And the first thing I'm going to say is if you choose to stay, then I'm going to explain to you what our new standard of excellence is. Because we never get explained what the standard of excellence is. What we get is a file and say, welcome to the team, go try your first case.
What's the standard of excellence? You know, I get a conviction rate on 99% of my cases. I'm a good lawyer.
No, that has never been, that is and I'm going to answer that because what it's not a numbers game.
Okay.
Because what you're talking about is the win at all costs nature of prosecuting that needs to stop as well. That's a part of the standard of excellence. The standard of excellence in this office is not to get the most convictions possible, not to put the most people in jail and increase the school to prison pipeline or increase mass incarceration. That is not a metric. That can't be a metric now and never was one of my metrics. Actually, three lawyers have applied for commendations in the office for the way I've treated their cases. And all three of them, none of them got incarcerative time, not a single one of them. Why? Because I look past the attorney into the individual and look at the totality of the individual. That's why when I talk about a standard of excellence, it's a culture shift. Remember, I said that a little earlier, it's a culture shift. So with that culture shift, you're talking about your actual power by being the state attorney. And then secondarily, your moral authority, your actual authority and your moral authority coming in. So what I'm going to tell folks and sit down with them and say, one, this is our standard of excellence. Two, you're not going to lose your job. I'm not going to fire you. If you choose to quit, you can quit. However, I'm not going to fire you. And the reason I want that is because I want that buy-in. The number one thing I learned when I was managing over 150 people during a business that I started when I was in high school, and also during the time where I managed over 200 volunteers on the Obama campaign, is you can't come in and just wield the big stick, okay? Most people in this county didn't even know either I worked on the campaign or I worked in the administration. You know why? I didn't want to come down to Broward County and say, I'm coming from DC to save Broward County. Like, what is that? Like, you don't know nothing about Broward County. Come on, man. But what I did is when I came here, I went directly in the community and spoke to everybody. Look, our family's from the South, Louisiana, Virginia. I have some family in North Florida and Palm Beach. So I came down here and got entrenched in the community, learned about the history of the community, spoke to people on the West Coast, also on the East Coast of Broward County, to understand the county before anyone even asked me to run for this position, because I didn't choose to run for this position. Multiple people asked me. In fact, they asked me to run for school board as well because of the good job I was doing in our juvenile justice system. So you have to have that moral buy-in. But as I tell a lot of folks too, I'd rather be in the trenches with a small group of people that I trust rather than a bunch of people that I can't trust, because I don't know who's going to walk over me if I trip. I don't know who's going to stab me in the back. So if you choose to leave, I'll shake your hand. More power to you. You'll get a good recommendation from the office. I don't care if you've been in the office 2 years or 25 years. You'll get a glowing recommendation. However, if you choose to stay, we will not only give you the authority to make the decisions that you know are the correct decisions, but we have a standard of excellence. And if that standard of excellence is not adhered to, I need to have another conversation. If we have, at the end of that conversation, it's a handshake and a goodbye, that's what it is.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about again, I spoke to someone, we're talking about buy-in, we talk about implicit bias, and you said you got yourself entrenched in the community, right? So I'm gonna give, we had fact patterns in law school, so I'm gonna give you a little bit of one to kind of get this point across. One of the things that Broward County is that this is a very multicultural place, right? You have a lot of people from the Caribbean. I'm Haitian Bahamian myself. They're Jamaicans. You got people from South America. You got everything happening here, right? And I also practice immigration law. I have a person right now that's facing deportation for a child abuse no harm case because they beat their kid, because that's what they do in places like that, right? So like if you have a case,
that's what happened when I was growing up.
So if you have a case like that comes to the office, someone from the islands or South America comes in, they beat their kid, there's no, and if the person gets convicted, they're going to get deported. What would you suggest for one of your attorneys in the office to do in that particular instance? Because now if the person gets deported, they're separated from their U.S. born child right now. So those are some more consequences of not only having the felony conviction for the child.
Well, that's an excellent hypothetical. I'm going to give you two. I'm gonna give you one for somebody who is a non-citizen and one for someone who is a citizen, okay? A really good friend that I went to college with. He came down here, used to live in Plantation. He's not Caribbean born. He's not from South America. He's born here in the United States, born in Delaware. He got spanked when he was a kid, and his parents called it giving him a beating. Okay. My parents called it a reminder. And I was like, I hate being reminded. So he spanked his kid, and his child reached up to get his backpack in a cubby, and the teacher saw a mark on his back, and they said, okay, what was that from? And I think he said he was disciplined by his father, and his father is well renowned in South Florida, and he was living in Broward County at the time. DCF came to the house. The case eventually came to the state attorney's office, and he was treated like a criminal. He could not be in his house for, I think it was 2 or 3 days. He was eventually arraigned and handcuffed and arrested on this case. And he ended up, after a couple of weeks, being able to be reunited with his family. He didn't abuse his child. He didn't do anything. In fact, his wife said that he gave him like 3, 4 pats. It wasn't anything, but it left a mark. Are we prosecuting cases now where if you discipline your children in a way that you may have been brought up, but other people in the community frown upon, do we hold them criminally responsible for it? Those are the type of things that we have to grapple with. It's not just mass incarceration in and of itself, but it affects the way that our community works within itself. In addition, you have other ways to discipline your kids as well. But he thought that to be the most effective. So are we wasting taxpayer dollars with that? In addition, I had another case where a mother, actually this is a recent case, a 2020 case, where a mother failed to pay her daughter's cheerleading costs for her outfit, and the SRO at the school filed grand theft charges against her. And our office filed that case. So because a mother forgot to pay it, and the only reason that she found out that she had a pending felony grand theft case was because she applied to be a Lyft driver, and they would not allow her to drive. So these are the types of cases that we're filing right now.
Wait, so she had the uniform but didn't pay for it, and then they said she stole it?
They gave her the uniform. Mm-hmm. paid like one payment on it and couldn't afford the rest of it. And then the season ended and she just forgot to give it back, but she didn't pay for it. SRO writes her up. When I was in school, what they would have done is tack that on to the end of the school year costs, or said you can't graduate until you pay this.
Right.
I went through 3 different colleges, okay? And I had costs at every single one of them. And every time I walked across the stage, it was an empty tube. You know why? Because I had costs.
Listen, I almost had one of them because I owed like $30 for the phone bill or something. And my parents were coming because I went to college in Chicago. And I was like, yo, mommy, you need to send me like $35 because if you don't, I'm going to walk across the stage and they're going to give me something empty because I owe this phone bill. And she was like, I can't believe you. Yeah. So that's what they did. They was like, well, when you settle your bill with us, then, you know, you'll get your degree.
And that's common sense. The common sense is not go to the state attorney's office and file a PC or a probable cause affidavit and then have the state attorney's office file the case. No, when I'm state attorney, that's not going to happen. Now, the other portion of that is the immigration portion. Because I also had a case recently and I ended up dropping the case. I think it was 2018. A man was accused of a sexual battery and kidnapping. He sat in jail for over a year. Ultimately, it was found that he did not commit it. It was ultimately found that we could not move forward with the case. And there was no indication, but he'd been sitting in jail for a year. He also had an immigration detainer. And then he was moved over to immigration. Immigration just said, we're kicking you out. That's it. Like, whether you were convicted or not, you're getting kicked out to your country. We have to understand those immigration concerns. If we're not sensitive to those immigration concerns, especially where there are kids involved or there are livelihoods involved. For instance, I left the country to escape prejudice that was happening or gang violence. However, we're not going through the process. And you know, as an immigration attorney, that process, the asylum process and all these things, the state attorney's office affects more than just your local criminal law, the local Walmart down on Broward, okay? It affects more than that. It affects family law, immigration, civil consequences, PI cases, securities fraud cases. It does everything.
Everything.
The criminal justice touches poverty, homelessness, the economics of a community, because someone, when they feel like their back's against the wall, then they a lot of times feel as though that they can go out and commit a crime, or they need to commit a crime. Why? Because they don't know when their next meal is coming. They don't know where they're going to sleep at night. They don't know if they're going to be safe, if their child's going to be safe, if they're going to be safe, if their wife's going to be safe. These are real life kitchen table issues that the state attorney's office deals with, but people don't realize it because they do not understand the full breadth of this office. And that's the important thing. You need people in this position that understand the full breadth and empower the assistant state attorneys to make the correct decision.
Okay, and so with the immigration consequence, the person that sat there, that was like a felony arrest, and how is it that immigration is alerted? Because I actually have a client that got arrested. So it was an undercover operation where a female cop was pretending to be a prostitute. So he ended up getting arrested on a solicitation charge, right? Now, mind you, he barely speaks English. He halfway know what the lady talking about, and the charge was dismissed. However, he was sent to immigration. Mind you, that's a misdemeanor arrest. That it was, but he ended up getting sent to immigration, and they wouldn't release him. So he eventually got deported from the United States because of that. So as a state attorney, will you notify ICE when someone comes into custody, no matter what the charge?
You know what it is. It's SB 168. You know what it is. These are the things that give BSO the ability to detain the individuals. I'm one of 2 individuals that actually went to Miramar and went outside of the detention center and spoke to those people who were protesting and have been protesting for years before any of us became prosecutors, all right? They've been doing this work. So I went to go talk to them and said, tell me really what's going on here. So they tell me what's going on. The state attorney's office has a responsibility again. Can we stop BSO from enforcing the law, enforcing that detainer? No, we can't. But what we can do is ensure that we, when possible, when the facts of the case allow us to, when possible, we can mitigate that with not suggesting a harsher time or not giving bonds that hold them overnight, which then would prompt that detainer to happen. Again, when possible. But the case that I was telling you about wasn't possible. It's a kidnapping and sexual battery. You're staying overnight.
Right.
I don't care if you have a cash bond or no cash bond system. You are likely staying overnight
Absolutely.
for those charges. In addition to that, when a bond is available, you work with the defense attorney to allow for a bond, because the purpose of a bond is to ensure that you're coming back to court. And we lose that a lot of times, to ensure that you're coming back to court. I'm not an advocate for a full no cash bond system. I've said this multiple times. I believe that there is a hybrid system that is allowed. Misdemeanor cases, except for DUIs and DV cases, which are domestic violence cases, no cash bond. Third degree felony, nonviolent, no cash bond. Everything else is a case by case basis. You get a second look review within 24 hours with the judge that you're assigned to. The judge that you're assigned to is assigned to you, honestly, that moment, but also within 12 hours. So you can have a second look court the next day, whether we're on Zoom or we're not on Zoom, or working virtually or not virtually.
Mm-hmm.
But you also mentioned ICE, and it is important to mention this. It's extremely important to mention this. Any candidate that says that they will prevent ICE from coming into the courthouse is lying to you. Not being dishonest, they're lying to you. I am telling you, you know this. You are an attorney. The state cannot prevent the federal government from entering a building that it doesn't even control. The state attorney's office does not control the vast majority of the courthouse. In addition to that, the state attorney's office can't make arrests. So if you say that we're releasing somebody, and then the state attorney's office agreed to a release, and then we will issue warrants for ICE agents who rearrest the individual, what is these? You're smiling because you know it's not possible. So it's important to know that you have a state attorney who is competent, who is not going to overpromise things, but also be truthful and honest with the public.
All right, so we talked about no cash bail, and you said for like small cases. So there's some of the people that are running are like, we're not arresting people for possession of marijuana anymore. What's your position on that?
The state attorney's office has no. First off, arresting isn't the right word. The state attorney's office doesn't arrest anybody.
Cases for
prosecution.
Yeah, that's right. Prosecuting misdemeanor marijuana cases.
Yes. So misdemeanor marijuana, just quickly. It's funny. I was on this show called, I forget what it was called. Induced Munchies. It was a podcast on 420. They wanted me on because they know I'm an advocate of changing the laws as it pertains to marijuana. So there's two things. First thing is, I believe that marijuana should be a part of the civil justice system, not the criminal justice system. We need to move it from the criminal space to the civil space.
All amounts of marijuana? Just marijuana, period?
Other than trafficking amounts. But I'm going to get into the details. Other than trafficking amounts.
Trafficking is tricky. Can I tell you a trafficking story? So I had a client that was an immigration.
I love this conversation.
I'm telling you. So he was, so what he used to do is that when he got paid on Friday, he would go buy all the weed he needs for the weekend, right? I knew he was going to say that. He would just go buy all the weed he needs for the weekend so he don't have to go back to the weed man. And then he ended up getting arrested with like a pocket full, like a huge pocket full of dime bags or whatever. I don't know how they sell them. Like just a bunch of bags of marijuana. And they
how they sell them.
They tried to attract him. He was like, no, Miss, they call me Miss Sandra. No, Miss Sandra, that was my weed for the weekend. I wasn't selling drugs.
So, all right.
Yes.
No, I'm gonna answer exactly what you're saying because you're absolutely correct. So in October of last year, I went to this summit called the Revolt Summit. Revolt, as many people know, is owned by Sean Combs. They did one in Atlanta. They did one in LA. I went to the one in LA. And when I went there, I went with some friends and I also was meeting with some people with regards to the campaign I missed them in Atlanta. And everywhere I turned, I was like, I know that smell. And I forget that I'm in California because of the nice weather. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in California. You turn every corner you turn and you understand that it's a legalized state. I was talking to a CEO of a company and he said, hey man, I love your story. I love what you're doing. Reach out to me. Would love to support the campaign. He said, here's my card and here's a blunt. So he handed me a blunt in my car. And then one of the girls that was walking, or women who owns a business, was walking around. She said, "I love what you said over there. Here's my card. Here's some edibles." I saw a guy on the stairs digging into a bag full of marijuana, just handing stuff out. Those are trafficking amounts as well in the state of Florida. So misdemeanor amounts, you'll hear some people say misdemeanor marijuana under 20 grams. Under 20 grams is a misdemeanor, okay? If you know anything about marijuana, you're gonna buy in bulk these days, and it's gonna be over 20 grams.
It's gonna be
If
over
you're caught with if you're caught with 20 grams, you're probably high from smoking everything else. Okay. So over 20 grams is, to a certain extent, possession of a felony amount.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, so you can't just talk about under 20 grams. You have to kind of paint it with a broad brush. So when I'm talking about trafficking, I'm not talking about people buying in bulk. That goes to case filing. Case filing has to have some common sense attached to it. There's many people in our office that do believe the same thing, that are in some of these specialized units, and that are also our line attorneys as well. The rubber doesn't meet the road with marijuana, though. The rubber meets the road with THC. So as you know, THC is a resin or derivative of the marijuana plant. Some people believe, some prosecutors in this office and other offices believe, that the THC is stronger and it's more potent. Now, let's think about this. Let's take a step back into history. So therefore, because it is more potent, we should charge it as a felony. We shouldn't break those cases down. We should continue to prosecute those cases. Let's take a step back in history. What did they say when crack came out? They said crack is not pure cocaine. It's a derivative of cocaine. It makes them crazier, it's cheaper, and it makes them run the streets. Okay, so now we have sentencing disparities between crack cocaine and powder cocaine, which is one of the things that unfortunately my father got caught up with when he, and it's part of the reason he became a convicted felon. So now we've shifted it to, if we continue that logic, THC and marijuana. We want to break down marijuana cases, but we still want to prosecute hard on THC cases because those are bad. Now, under a Cannady administration, that's not going to happen. The THC derivative, especially if it's in an oil or it's within a resin, we are going to prosecute those cases similarly situated, especially the similarly situated situations, as a marijuana case. But again, I believe those should be in the civil system, not the criminal system. And the last thing is, if you look in the civil citation and the civil citation laws, which are in the county, not within the state's purview, they have only allowed for under 20 grams. And they only allow it for first offense, not re-offense. Community court as well. People all keep saying community court is great. Community court is great. No, it's not as great as you say it is. I've been there. I know plenty of unfortunate people who have been caught up in the system. They've been diverted there, or they could not have been diverted there. And also the service providers as well. You need to change criminal court as well. You need to be able to add that if you have priors, however, they're old, or they don't pertain to this case, or you have a drug addiction and it is not but it's the de minimis amount that doesn't allow you to go to our felony or our misdemeanor drug court division. You're in civil court, community court or civil citation, you're able to get in. If you're not able to get in, you can't get the treatment you need.
Yeah, and weed is one of those interesting things, because I talked about it with another candidate. And for instance, I had there's a friend of mine. She has a son that has he's like schizophrenic, bipolar, something's going. He hears voices, right? And you know, when he was on medication, he hated it because he would just sleep all day, couldn't function. But when he smokes weed, he doesn't hear the voices anymore. But every time you turn around, he's getting arrested like every other week or every month on a possession of marijuana, but he's using it to kind of deal with his mental illness. So what can we do with that? Because again, if it's only going to be for the first offense, people are carrying marijuana using marijuana for different reasons. We have some people getting rich selling it, and then we have other people going to jail. I think that's one of a problem. What about, and some people don't know, and now the medical marijuana cards, you can kind of get those, but everybody ain't able, so like what do we do in that instance if we could determine that maybe the person's use of marijuana is for a medical purpose, even though they don't have the medical marijuana card?
You brought up, and I'm writing this down because I wanted to make sure I address this. You brought up so many issues. There's a reason why I talk about security. I'm going to point right here: security, justice, and economy. There's a reason why, and I usually say security, ensuring our most vulnerable communities are secure, women and children, LGBTQ, Black folks, Jewish folks, Hispanic folks, and everybody in between. Justice, equitable justice within the courtroom and outside the courtroom. Just like George Floyd, that's what we were dealing with inside and outside the courtroom. And then the economics, the economy of a community. Some get rich off of it, some don't. When you have a secure community, you have a prosperous community. Then you have a poor community, you have a violent community. Mark Lamont Hill was on a podcast. Mark Lamont Hill, who's an author and a professor.
At a Temple, right?
At a Temple, yeah. He's an excellent author. He said recently on a podcast that he wants to, he basically said that the reason people are yelling defund the police, and I disagree with him in some ways, but the reason people are yelling defund the police is because he understands out in the suburbs, they're not calling the police. You know why? Because they have private security, they have gates, they have different ways to deal with it within the community. In the rural areas, many times, they're not calling the police.
And the other thing with that too is I think they understand the consequences of getting the police involved in every situation, right? Because once you call the cops and you get them in there, it's a hot mess trying to get out of that mess. So they're like, listen, we know we're not going to put none of this on my kid record because then he can't run for Congress when he turns 30 or whatever. But they understand the consequences of getting the police involved. So sometimes you're like, listen, we got to just figure out how to handle this, right?
Like when the police need to be called, and government needs to be called, that's great. And you need that as a law-abiding citizen. You need that because sometimes you can't deal with it within your house. Sometimes you can't deal with it within your community.
There are situations where you have to call the police, but there are times where, sometimes people just call the police too much. It's like, listen, we don't need the police. We just need to talk about this.
Exactly, and we know that on sometimes on our side of the tracks when they call him, then they do. I'm just calling him to scare him, but I don't want him to go. But you can't do that. The moment you call me, somebody's good. This is a thing now.
Jail.
So a secure community being prosperous community basically means that we understand the value of money. We understand the value of where we're at. We understand the value of our jobs and our positions, and we don't need to rob our neighbors. We don't need to commit crimes within our communities. Why? Because we are economically secure. Okay, we're economically secure. So when you connect that to marijuana, which is one of the things that you were talking about, and some people prospering off of it and other people not prospering off it, that's about legislation. It's about going to Tallahassee and speaking about people who can benefit from it. Not too many people in our country, especially here in the state of Florida, and especially here in Broward County, have been locked up for more. If you're locked up for a day, it's too much to be locked up at this point in history for possession of marijuana. And people have been locked up for more than a day. And when someone says they've been locked up for possession of marijuana and they've been given prison time, no, usually, unless it's trafficking amounts or simple possession, usually it's when it's a violation of your probation, you violated a number of times, and then a prosecutor sends you to prison. I had a case before too. Old case, went back to 2007. He violated like 7 times since 2007.
It's hard to pass
all the violations.
Man, what you doing? Why are you trying to check my urine?
Every single time he's violated has been with possession of marijuana or urine in his marijuana. Every single time.
Yeah.
I'm not sticking you in prison for that, but you need to stop it. But you haven't committed any more crimes. You know what I did? I time served him. I time served him at that point. I'm like, look, you've been on literal supervision since 2007. It's over a decade, and all of your violations are marijuana. We're not going to stop you from smoking. you're going to go to
Come on
jail
now.
for 2-3
Let's
days and
stop
come
right
out.
there on that one. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but stop right there.
No, no,
At
you're
some
fine.
point, that's like pure nonsense, right? Like for some judge, like, dude, judge, you know this dude's smoking weed. Like, just let him live, right? Why would you keep someone on probation for 10 years because he keeps dropping dirty urine? I mean,
But
like,
you
to
have
me,
to,
that's like, it's mind blowing.
but you got to understand the power of the state attorney. The power of the state attorney, when a judge gets a case, okay, for violation of probation, let's use that as an example. The 2007 case, now it's 2020. All your violations have been for possession of marijuana, marijuana in your urine, not even possession, just in
No,
your
it's in the
urine.
pee. It's going to stay there.
Exactly. It's going to stay
Problem.
there.
You know what I'm saying? He hear voices. I don't know.
When,
Stressed.
I don't know.
I don't know.
When the judge, and I want to get back to the hearing voices and medicating portion. Pen's not working. Because that's extremely important. The judge gets a piece of paper, like a packet of paper, but it's a piece of paper basically that said he's being violated this time for having a dirty urine. He's being violated this time. They don't know that he's violated 6 other times for a dirty urine. They just know he's been violated this time for a dirty urine, because the judge is typically not on the bench in front of this one defendant for the last 15 years.
Let me tell you, okay, stop there. He got that case number though. He know that case say 07 dash whatever it is, or do they get a new number for the
But that's the power of the state attorney. It's incumbent upon the state attorney to go back in the history and look at it. There are plenty of state attorneys that don't do that. They count the amount of violations of probation and say you violated 4 times, your score is this, you go to prison for this amount of time. Because that was taught to us when we came in, and not broken. The chain hasn't been broken for 40 years. You violated 4 or 5 times. I don't care what you've done, but you violated 4 times. But how about you open number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, see what he's been violated for. Did he pick up a new case? Well, I look in the system, he hasn't picked up a new case. So they're all technicals. Are they financial? Because I don't want to send this guy to jail if they're financial. Oh, it's all dirty urine? What are we doing?
What are we doing?
But the police, all the police see is that, 1, there's a warrant, you're getting arrested. Probation has said, I have to violate you per our standards because you dropped dirty is what they call it. And then it ends up in the prosecutor's lap, it ends up in front of a judge. This is why I say there's injustice within the criminal justice system. Injustice within the criminal justice system. It's not just the police on the street putting your physical or proverbial knee on the neck of a defendant. It's the actual system continuously keeping you down because of either ignorance, willful ignorance, neglect or negligence, or willful intentional actions, or all 3. And we need to stop that when it comes to the state attorney's office. So that's why I said earlier, a standard of excellence. This standard of excellence is something that I've done throughout my career, which is why there are plenty of people who otherwise wouldn't support me, who have supported me and said, I've worked with you, I know your standard. And that's the standard that you will impart on within the office. But I'm not saying because I know I know we both talk about it because I've talked to you before. The mental health portion and supplementing your medicine with illicit drugs or illegal drugs because you have a mental health condition. So Broward County is under a consent decree right now in the jail. A lot of people don't know that. Since the 1970s, we've been under a 40-year consent decree because of civil rights violations. We know our jails are packed full of full. We know our jails are horrible conditions. We have some of the worst conditions within the state of Florida. But according to the federal government, we have the worst conditions for mental health individuals in the state of Florida. That's why we're under this consent decree. That's why we continue to prosecute individuals a little harder who have those mental health concerns. But we have currently one of the best judges in the state of Florida, Judge Porth, Ari Porth, who used to be a representative up in Tallahassee and has studied this and understands the mental health portion extremely well. I sat down with him before and I told him, look, I think that we need a bigger courtroom. He's like, not only do we need a bigger courtroom, we need a full-time courtroom, a dedicated courtroom. This is before I started running. I was just picking his brain about it because I had a case in there. And he said, yes, we do. And I agree. We need a full-time substance abuse courtroom and a full-time mental health courtroom as well, because sometimes they overlap, but a lot of times they don't.
Because they criminalize
one that does
addiction all
not
the time.
necessitate the other. Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Criminalize addiction all the time. You have all these addicts in jail, like you've never given them treatment. Yes, they're gonna smoke crack tomorrow. They're gonna smoke. I think with Flocka, they was putting people in rehab for that, because that one was like one of them real crazy drugs. But you know,
but back in 2015, there was only one person in Broward County who had ever successfully detoxed from Flocka. Flocka was a nasty drug. Yeah, excuse me. Bath salts as well, right before that. A horrible drug. So Broward County in South Florida is known for bad drugs. And we could have nipped these things in the bud years ago if the state attorney's office was prosecuting pill mills as they should have. We weren't prosecuting pill mills, okay?
Partially in 2010, Airware. You can go.
I'm telling you. There's a show named Claws that was based around the pill mills of Florida.
Yes. I had a woman who came into my office. Her daughter had gotten caught with like 6,700 pills, and it's like $1,000 each pill, right? The bond is like $1,000 for like each pill or something. Her bond was over like $1 million. And I told that lady that, listen, even if you got that money, you better not go in there trying to pay no 160,000, 10% of that bond, because they're gonna want to know where you got $1 million from, and they're gonna think you got it from selling pills, So it was one of those things but the way the girl got the pills was that every place she went, they gave her a 90-day supply. Like you would go, they used to give you like 270 pills at a time. And she literally, I'm not saying she's right or nothing like that, but they would have people go get like 270 pills. Like, why would you give somebody 270 oxy pills at one time? It's insane.
So the issue, again, if you understand the underlying issues, a prosecutor can't just let things go, okay? So the questions, well, hold on. The answers that my opponents typically give is, well, I'm not going to do something. Well, no, a prosecutor does something, all right? But the question is, who does it get done to, okay? Who does it get done to? Does it get done to the woman that has the drug problem, went in, got 90 pills, and it said, I'm going here. I'm gonna get 90 pills. I'm gonna sit at home and I'm getting high for 2 weeks. And then I'm going back in and I would do the same.
It's like they just got all these problems, and once they done took the pill, they don't have no problems no more. I mean, they don't have them problems. They got some other problems looming, but they're like, at least I don't feel bad about
but then the question becomes again, are we criminalizing the user, or who do we need to go after? Because at this point, especially with the pill mills, it's not a bunch of traffickers coming in completely. It's dispensaries, it's individuals, it's the legislation, it's everything. The criminal justice, there's injustice in the criminal justice system. Du Bois said, the issue of the 20th century is race. I am saying the issue of the 21st century is criminal justice. We need to get this right. I was talking to my mother-in-law the other day, and I was talking to her about the 60s and when she was growing up. And she said, look, actually, I asked her, she's from New Orleans, so I think she's objective. First thing she said is, I said, what are you looking for from your sheriff or from your state attorney? First thing she said is, I want them to tell me the truth. I don't want you to lie to me. I'm sick of politicians lying to me, number one. She probably said that because I'm married to her daughter, and she's like, you better not be lying to my daughter. But she's like, I want my politicians to be telling the truth. The second thing is, she said, look, we watch TV, we see what's going on with George Floyd, what's going on in Atlanta and other places. Our issue was being able to sit at lunch tables. The generation before that, they had other issues, lynchings and things like that are running wild. Your issues are not our issues. Your issues are the police and criminal justice. And that's when I said, our generation's issue is criminal justice, the injustice in the criminal justice system. And that's what's so important about this race. And that's why you got to get it right, not only on who you elect, but who we prosecute, because we can't continue to prosecute the same people the same way. Again, as I said earlier, if you want a different face with the same old ideas, I can name a few people that are running against me. Okay, I can name a few opponents. But if you want a new face with new ideas and a new way of doing it without overselling you, talking to you straight, talking to you the only way that someone should talk to you, telling you what you can do, what you can't do, who we need to partner with to get this done, then I'm your guy.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up. I could talk to you all day. It seems like, right? So I got to ask you a couple of things. So I got to ask you about the death penalty, because that was something that came up the other day, and a lot of you guys didn't really get to like answer that and state your position on that. What's your position on the death penalty? We talked about Ayala earlier, who said, she was like, I'm not seeking a death penalty in any case. And the people in Orange County lost their minds, and she's not even running. She's like, I don't need no part of this. So she's not even running for a re-election. There is a sister World that I went to law school that's running now. Monique is a candidate for state attorney there in Orlando. Yeah, so she went to.
Where'd you go to law school at?
UF, University of Florida. That's what's up.
Talk about, hey,
whatever.
What you talking about? Yeah,
all that there. But okay, so
that's why you wear my colors.
Whatever.
You wearing my colors right now.
I just needed something to put on real quick. All right, so the death penalty, that's some serious business. Let's talk about that.
Death penalty is extremely serious business. As you mentioned, Aramis Ayala. Aramis Ayala got her cases taken away from her the moment that she said that she was not going to utilize the death penalty. And the Florida Supreme Court upheld that. I knew they were going to uphold it. I used to work in the Florida Supreme Court. Your strongest weapon that the people of the state of Florida enacted, okay, after it was overturned in the 70s and saying that they couldn't use it, and Florida was one of the first states to actually say, to put in the new legislation during that time to legalize it. Again, the people of Florida at that time said, we want to use the death penalty. So saying you're not going to use it is, I see your eyes. So you're not going to.
Who's going to be in Stark? Listen, I went to school in Gainesville. Stark was like up the road. You know what I'm saying? Like death row was right there. I drove past it a few times.
I've been to prisons in Florida. I've visited prisons in Florida. I've seen family in prisons in other states as well. I understand. The issue for me with the death penalty specifically is this. If you have, let's take the case in Orlando. We're talking about an individual who killed a black man who killed a black police officer, I believe, and his black girlfriend at the time, all dead. They wanted the death penalty. Said, I'm not going to use the death penalty. I've seen cases in our office where a very famous one in Broward County, where a black man was called to a house to deliver a pizza. Some white supremacists ordered a pizza, knew that the black man was going to come, pulled him into the house, tied him to the chair, tortured him. And the last torturous thing that they did was go down to the car, get a battery, and inject his veins with battery acid. He died what the coroner considered one of the most gruesome deaths a person can die from, burned from the inside out. And now currently we have a case which has made national news. The Cruz case, the Parkland shooting, MSD. Goes into a school, murders teachers, children, most vulnerable people. You have Dylan Roof in South Carolina prays with a group of black people in a black church when they invite him in, and then commences to murder them. If you believe that in a community this diverse, where racism, xenophobia, anti-immigrant, homophobia, anti-trans behavior still looms extremely relevant, and that is the possibility in our community that you could shoot up a church, you could shoot up a masjid, you could shoot up a temple, you could shoot up a school, that the death penalty will not be sought in the Cannady administration, you, as my father and mother would say, my grandfather would say, you lost your mind. In those cases, the most serious cases, if we cannot use the death penalty in those cases, why is it even around? Now, if the legislature says no more, okay, no more. We can't do anything about that, all right? However, you shoot up a church with my mom in it. You shoot up a school with my kid in it. You shoot up a temple with my best friend in it, we got a problem. So I'm not going to back down away from some of the most serious cases that we can ever see. We're not exempt from that. This is not something that hasn't happened in our community. It has happened in our community. So directly to answer your question, yes, I will use it with extreme discretion. It will not just be me making the decision. It will be a panel of experienced prosecutors and community members or that have that authority to do that. But I will not run away from the challenge that has been given to me. And I believe that anyone that says any different is running away from their duty as a prosecutor to prosecute to the fullest extent of the law. It's not up to me, it's up to a jury. It's up to me to present the facts. It's up to a jury to decide and a judge to rule.
Okay. All right. So we're winding down right now, and I just have a couple of things. And during our conversation, you did talk about some of the innovative things that you were doing in the office. You said you're going to talk to everybody. Like, how you going to pay them people to make them stay?
How you going to pay them people? They spoke about it last night at the Deltas and AKAs that we don't. What they say? How are you going to make things equal? Okay, because one of the questions was from the moderator that my understanding is you got a pay bump from
the new ones coming in,
those at the bottom.
Still there, making
exactly, but the veterans didn't get it.
Right.
That's a misunderstanding of the office. Justin McCormick, who said it, said that doesn't happen. Sarah Nell affirmed, and I raised my hand because I wanted to talk about it too. And what I wanted to say was, that's why you need someone from within the office to be here. People are talking about things they don't know nothing about. You out here walking into people's houses trying to change things, and you don't know nothing about the house, okay? Now, there are some changes that have been made for what I like to call political expediency during times of election. But trust me, some of those things won't stay, but the one thing that will stay is that people will get paid fairly. So you spoke about this earlier. People are going to leave. I guarantee you people are going to leave, all right? We need to hire people into the office that can do the job. We can't just continue to hire brand new attorneys. People are going to have the opportunity to keep their job. I'm not firing anybody. I said that at the beginning when you asked that. Nobody's going to get fired, but if you want to leave, you can leave. There will be more money left on the table. But also, we're going to look at the books. We're going to see where we can tighten up and where we can actually spend. Owning a business, I know this, that your number one, I went to business school as well, your number one fixed cost is what it's called, variable cost and fixed cost. Your number one fixed cost is, you smile because you know what that is.
Too. Because I have an MBA too.
Your number one fixed cost is your employees. Not gonna do anything about that, all right? And no, we don't have $1 billion budget like BSO, but we got a $40 million budget. You tell me we can't run an effective ship with $40 million? Did state attorneys need to make money at the bottom? Period, point blank. Anyone, I believe, that comes in, and says that the starting attorneys should not have made $50,000 doesn't understand what we go through to be in this position. People live with their parents and their grandparents. People are getting married just so that they can have a place to stay and have two incomes together. People are shacking up. People are renting rooms. Yeah,
because I was not even when I graduated. I made like $28,000 when I graduated, and luckily I wasn't in South Florida. But I was making $28,000. It was crazy, and you get paid once a month. It's like by the end of that month, you like, Lord, like I need to call somebody. Can I come to your house for dinner? It's rough.
When you leave law school, you don't go, whoo, I'm going from one struggle to the next. Thank you, Lord. No, it is. And that, unfortunately, somebody I really respect who's in the office, told me, if you stay in this office, you have to be comfortable with not being able to afford a house, not being able to buy a car. You must always lease a car, unless your spouse is going to leave and make the most money. If your spouse leaves and makes money and that's a career, then great. You can stay here. You can bring in the insurance. You can leave a little early and help with the kids when necessary. You can do stuff like that. But you ain't going to stay here and think that you're going to support a family. You're not going to be able to do that. Like I said, I got to warn myself. With these benefits, even with the benefits, it's not going to work, okay? So what am I going to do? We're going to reassess the books. We're actually going to reallocate money where it needs to be, not just with the attorneys, but also with the staff. Staff is woefully underpaid, all right? And they have horrible hours as well. So we're talking about people making under $20,000. I know people that started off making $10,000 and $15,000. Those are horrible wages. I know people who are assistants of chiefs in this office who have to carry a second job. They don't have it. They have one child or no children. They have to carry a second job just because the benefits of this job, health benefits and insurance, are good. And we believe that just because we provide you with health benefits, we should be able to not pay you a living wage. Absolutely not. I learned that again when I was with the business that I owned. I had to deal with issues of hiring and firing. I had to deal with issues of discipline, issues of healthcare, issues of immigration, because we had some folks who were from the Caribbean and they were like, hey, can you sponsor my visa? I've been a good worker. I really need your help. We had to deal with those issues. So it's more than just pay people more money. You got to understand that. But you also need to put people in a position to help make those smart decisions.
All right. So thank you very much. It was good talking to you. So tell people how
it's over. Oh my gosh.
Tell people how they can get in touch with you, volunteer their time, give you a little bit of money, so let them know. So
what I'm going to do right now, if people are on this, actually nobody's on. It's just me and you about to write in a little chat.
Yeah, they're on the live though. They're on Facebook Live. They're on Facebook Live.
So
the video streaming live.
Okay, great. You can go to my website, davidcannady.com. And it's David, CANNADY.com. And you can put your information in. You can learn more about us. You can join us every Sunday, except for Father's Day. But every Sunday we do a town hall. It's usually at bit.ly.com/vote Cannady or David Cannady. One of those two will get you into the bit.ly meeting. In addition to that, you can go to my Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and see what I'm doing. At Vote Cannady, and that's at Vote CANNADY. It's right here. More importantly, right there. More importantly, when you go to davidcannady.com, hit that red button till you can't hit it anymore. That red button says donate on it, because we want you to donate as much as your time, as much as your money as possible, because we need a little bit of money to continue to push this race forward. Exactly. In addition to that, you can contact me by cell phone at 954-707-0530. I'll give you that number again, 954-707-0530. I give my phone number out because if you can't get in touch with your elected officials, why in the world are we doing this? We're a community, all right? So you should be able to contact your people. I learned that when I was in DC and Tallahassee, all right? Cory Booker did it through his Twitter. I'm doing it. I do it through cell phone as well. We need to be in touch with our communities. We can't be detracted from our communities. So that number again is 954-707-0530. And check me out at davidcannady.com and Vote Cannady.
All right. And when is it that they're going to vote for you?
August 18th.
2020.
That's right. 2020. Exactly. I think we got less than 8 weeks. You definitely want to register to vote, or register for your ballot, your absentee ballot, early voting ballot. If you don't do that, I think it'll be a challenge. Folks should not have to choose between getting involved in democracy and also their health. You should be able to maintain both without.
Right, so I have some information on how to request your vote.
Go, please.
You can go to browardsoe.org to request a ballot, or if you don't have access to the internet, you can call 954-957-7500 to request a vote by mail ballot. I believe that they did start sending them out. So some people may have received them like a couple of weeks ago.
My wife did, yeah.
Yeah, so what you receive, you can update your signature, because some of us, our signature changes all the time. You can update your signature on that, and you can request your vote by mail ballot. You have to have it turned in by July the 20th, 2020, in order for you to get it in time. Early voting is from August 8th to August 15th is early voting. August 8th to August 15th is early voting.
Yes.
You have to submit your vote by mail ballot by July the 20th, 2020. And David Cannady is going to sign us off by telling you how to get in touch with him and when to vote for him.
That's right. August 18th, 2020 is the day to vote. Do exactly everything you said if you want to vote early or vote by mail. Again, davidcannady.com. Check me out. Hit the red button that says donate 50 times. And give me $1,000 and go to Vote Cannady. And on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, you can definitely always DM me on Instagram and also on Facebook. And remember, security, justice, economy, that's what we're fighting for. I appreciate your time. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good
I
one.
appreciate you.
All right. Bye-bye.